You again? Back for another action-packed serving of information already? Well then, let's not waste any time. The Extended Cut DLC caused a ton of controversy between fans of the series and actually created an even larger gap between those who actually enjoyed the endings originally and those who still hate them. It feels as though there are two sides prepping for war, which is exactly what BioWare wanted to do since day one. Lots of speculation for everybody, remember? The Extended Cut DLC certainly caused that speculation, but what it didn't do was disprove the indoctrination theory, which is what a lot of critics believe. If anything, the Extended Cut DLC actually provided even more evidence than ever before. So why is the indoctrination theory still not 100% confirmed or still not 100% disproven if the Extended Cut DLC is already out? Well, because as I said, BioWare wants controversy. If Mass Effect 3 truly is the final game in the series of this storyline, as they say, although remember, they said the same thing about the Halo franchise and now look where we are, then BioWare and EA wants to keep the controversy going for as long as humanly possible, because it generates them a ton of money by making people buy DLC, like the upcoming Leviathan DLC, in an effort to find out whether or not the indoctrination theory is true. It's a genius marketing strategy. Hold everybody on a huge cliffhanger, use the indoctrination theory to your advantage to sell future DLC, and then when they finally are done mining the money pit that is the Mass Effect series, we may finally get an answer. It's the harsh reality of the gaming industry that we all need to come to terms with, so only time will tell for sure, but for right now it's time to jump back onto the snowball of speculation and look at the facts and evidence uncovered from the Extended Cut DLC. Like the second documentary, I will be starting with evidence that comes prior to that final push down the hill, then going with pre-Citadel evidence, which is the evidence that happens before Shepard enters the beam, then Citadel evidence after Shepard goes into the transport beam, then into the decision chamber room, and finally ending our journey together once and for all with evidence that takes place after the game's ending and outside of the game itself. From there, it will be up to BioWare to determine the fate of this theory and the franchise as a whole based on their actions over the next year. Going into this evidence, it is expected that you've already seen the first two documentaries, as a lot of this evidence has strong ties to the other documentaries and needs to be remembered in order to understand the significance of some of these pieces. By the way, stay until the end of the documentary and you'll learn about a new contest going on over at CleverNoob to celebrate this new documentary. So yes, anyway, back to not wasting time, let's do this. The very first thing I'd like to talk about is something a fan on our YouTube channel tipped us off about, named Tatankalov. It does a good job at putting the rest of the evidence into perspective if you're capable of remembering what it implies in connection to the rest of the evidence that has already been explained in the first two documentaries, and the evidence that will be explained in this documentary. This evidence is about Rana Thanoptis, the Asari we first met back on Saren's research facility on Vermeer.
Sovereign's signal is too strong. Spend too much time near the ship and you feel it, like a tingle at the back of the skull. It's like a whisper you can't quite hear. You're compelled to do things, but you don't know why. You just obey. Eventually, you just stop thinking for yourself. It happens to everyone at the facility. My first test subject was the man I replaced. Now I just want to get out of here before it happens to me. Signal's not exactly the right word. There's some kind of energy field emanating from the ship. It changes thought patterns. Indoctrination is subtle. By the time the effects become noticeable, it's usually too late.
Fun fact, the voice actress for Rana Thanoptis is Mark Mear's wife. Mark Mear is the guy who voices male Shepard. In real life, they're actually married. So anyway, if you choose to let her live, you'll also run into her again in Mass Effect 2 under similar circumstances. If you also choose to let her live in Mass Effect 2, she makes a cameo appearance in Mass Effect 3, except this time she makes headlines with the Alliance News Network. As it turns out, being under Saren's influence all those years ago ended up getting her indoctrinated, as she killed a bunch of Asari militants before committing suicide while in custody. By the way, this isn't a maybe she's indoctrinated. The game very clearly states that she is indoctrinated, not even considering the fact that the title of the article is Indoctrination. Anywho, the investigators on her case prior to her suicide stated that Rana reported hearing voices inside her head. The voices foretold the ascension of the Asari, and told Thanoptis that anyone fighting the Reapers needed to die. Sounds like a classic case of indoctrination, right? Well, that's because it is, but it's what the case contains that is significant. First of all, the voices in the head aspect, as we all suspected, is indicative of indoctrination. That's nothing new. However, this is the first documented and proven case of indoctrination that talked about voices in the head, rather than just assuming that it's relevant to indoctrination. There were unofficial reports in the past, sure, but a critic could look at those and cast them off as meaningless and attribute the voices to a dwindling mental condition of the person being affected. However, this has been a studied case in the Mass Effect universe, and it is now proven 100% fact that hearing voices are an indication of indoctrination. Why is this so important? Think back to the Citadel scene where Shepard is talking to the Elusive Man. Remember way back in the first documentary when I talked about the voices there in the background that were also in the dream sequences? Well, now those voices actually have meaning, because as I said before, we only assumed earlier that those voices and whispers were signs of indoctrination. However, now we know with 100% certainty that those voices are in fact signs of indoctrination. What else would they be, honestly? Think about it. There would be absolutely no reason whatsoever for those voice whispers in the background to be placed there unless it was a clear indoctrination attempt, which it was. Couple that with the oily shadows laced around the screen, and it's pretty irrefutable truth now that we have this article as a reference for the voices. What's even more intriguing is that the developers could have removed these noises in the Extended Cut DLC, but decided to leave them there instead. Why? I think the answer speaks for itself. This is a confirmed. But I'm not done yet with Rana Thanoptis' case. The other significant thing about this is the time frame in which it took Rana to become indoctrinated. It says right in the article that it is suspected she became indoctrinated due to her time spent in the research lab on Virmire. The events of Mass Effect 1 took place during the year 2183 CE. The events of Mass Effect 3 took place during the year 2186 CE. That's a 3-year time span in which the indoctrination had time to manifest itself into Rana Thanoptis' mind and eventually weaken her enough to be controlled. Do you see where I'm going with this? It has also been over the course of 3 years that Shepard has been exposed to Reaper influence. The very first would be when Shepard was on Eden Prime and encountered Sovereign. But over the span of these last 3 years, as I stated in the last documentary, Shepard has been fighting Reaper forces, was present on the Virmire research lab for a few hours, the same lab that indoctrinated Rana, fought the indoctrinated and directly controlled version of Saren on the Citadel, thus technically interacting with Sovereign directly. He has been around many indoctrinated people and beings. He has been touched by the Thorian's influence, another creature that mind controls individuals, and even succumbed to the Reaper influence itself a bit, which means that when Shepard synced minds with Shiala, that he was also gaining the influence from the Reapers that the Thorian had already been exposed to. He was aboard a dead Reaper for a prolonged period of time. The Normandy carries a Reaper IFF, which outputs Reaper signals. He has discovered many Reaper artifacts across many different worlds across the series. He was at multiple bases that had all been wiped out and had its inhabitants indoctrinated, which, by the way, this is the reason the Elusive Man becomes indoctrinated, because he was at a dig site on Shanxi that had all of its inhabitants indoctrinated, and he felt the effects years later in Mass Effect 3, just like Rana. Anyway, Shepard was also captured and put to sleep for over 2 days on a base that contained an active Reaper artifact no more than a few rooms away from him that had successfully indoctrinated everybody at the base that was keeping Shepard hostage during the Arrival DLC. He fought and manually killed a proto-human Reaper on the Collector base. He fought and killed a Reaper on Rannoch, among so many more examples that could be given, but I think you get the point. But if you really need me to spell it out for you, according to the game's lore, even one of these events is enough for a person to become indoctrinated. Shepard has been subjected to these situations for over 3 years now, and it begins to show the wear and tear on his mind throughout the entire game of Mass Effect 3. It was a pretty major plot point that Shepard's sanity was slipping throughout the game, making him even easier to manipulate in the end. But the reason Rana's part in this is so important is that because she is, once again, the first documented case in the entire series where the assumptions about indoctrination are now proven fact, that it can take many years before a person becomes indoctrinated. In Rana's case, it was 3 years from the time of her initial exposure. In Shepard's case, guess what? It was also 3 years from the time of initial exposure, in addition to a slew of other notable encounters mentioned a few seconds ago that could have and should have added to that process. Confirmed, because as was stated in the first 2 documentaries, Shepard not being indoctrinated is an even larger plot point than him surviving the events in the Destroy ending, which, by the way, is still an unresolved plot hole that is expanded upon in this documentary. And speaking of that Reaper on Rannoch, he left us an interesting remark that I didn't include in the previous documentaries. As the Reaper is dying, he tells Shepard, "You resist, but you will fail." That sounds like something you'd say in the middle of a physical confrontation, like something Harbinger would be saying to Shepard during a firefight in Mass Effect 2. But it's said after the battle is already over, and even though the Reaper has already lost, he continues to say it anyway. It's possible he is talking about the overall struggle over organics, and now even synthetics, versus the Reapers. However, wouldn't you think he'd say something a little different, like, "You all resist," or "Your species resists"? He directed it specifically at Shepard for a reason. He wasn't talking about a physical confrontation because Shepard isn't fighting all of the Reapers at once. The bottom line is that this Reaper is telling Shepard that he will eventually succumb to their influence, much like how Harbinger at the end of the Arrival DLC tells Shepard, "Your mind will be ours," quite literally. So with that in mind, I think it's fair to give this piece of evidence a plausible. Now I'd like to take a re-look at Major Coates. Not much has changed with him despite one new major finding, but there are a few other little things that could use the addressing. A large quantity of these new findings are thanks to Pretzel once again. First is the fact that Coates seems to be a magical teleporter because he actually changes his place multiple times during the barracks scene. When everybody is flying to the barracks, Coates is supposed to be inside the shuttle with everyone else. Pretzel used the flycam to watch this scene, and he discovered that Coates is in fact not aboard the shuttle, but actually already at the destination as the shuttle approaches. Yet, the very second that Shepard and Anderson exit the shuttle, Coates magically appears back inside the shuttle again. Further enhancing the weirdness of this scene is the fact that the shuttle everybody is riding on actually is not an Alliance shuttle. It's a Cerberus one. It has the same number of seats in a Cerberus shuttle, 9, and even the Cerberus logo inside of it. Yet, it's been remodeled to look like an Alliance ship. And yet, when we took off and jumped into the shuttle earlier on, the shuttle was in fact an Alliance-modeled ship with only 4 seats. Why did it change? And how did Major Coates manage to be in 2 places at once? Now, all of this is very intriguing, sure, but I can't help but feel like this is just a game mechanic or a mistake of some kind, because let's face it, we've been finding a lot of those. Perhaps they changed the shuttle model to accommodate the fact that now there are 3 new people aboard the shuttle. It's just weird because they actually painted over the Cerberus ship's exterior rather than just using a pre-existing Alliance shuttle that they had already made. The whole Coates magic trick could also possibly be explained away by mapping. Honestly, I don't understand why his character model would be at the destination prior to the team's arrival, but I'm willing to cast it off as a mere development mistake, or perhaps something in the development process that we just don't understand. To me, if the developers wanted to capitalize on this whole Major Coates thing, they would have done it in a way more obvious way than that. So this gets a big fat X from me. But I'm not done with the whole Major Coates nonsense yet, as I'm sure you guessed. Next is something I touched upon previously a little bit, and is also something that a lot of people have been stressing about the Major Coates case. Anderson clearly makes the orders that nobody should retreat under any circumstances during this mission.
They know we're coming. This will be a one-way trip for many of us, but there can be no retreat, no stepping back. We move forward at all costs, understood?
Booyah. Yes, sir.
Johnson, Coates, you two will coordinate the artillery units.
It was a no-holds, all-in, all-or-nothing, final fight, last shot type of mission. Anderson certainly stressed this fact leading up to the final push, and Coates clearly knew it as well. In fact, Coates even reminds us of this on the radio during the final mission a few times.
This turret is huge. Position. The rest of Hammer is still en route. Gotta get a lock. Something's missing with the guidance. We're almost there, Abel. Hold on. We're supposed to take that thing down. We wait for it to get close. Then we hit it with everything we've got. I'm sending in more ground forces.
They're coming in behind us.
They're coming from everywhere. Going for the tanks. Protect the tanks at all costs. Without those missiles, we've got no chance. Sounds like good news, Commander.
We'll see.
Hammer, this is Admiral Anderson. The Reaper ground forces are making a push. Hold your ground. Protect those tanks until we can get a shot.
You heard it, people. Get ready.
Yet, no more than 20 minutes later, he's going back on his word in Anderson's and issuing a retreat order.
It's too much. We need to regroup. Fall back to the buildings.
Why? All in means all in. There would be quite literally no purpose in calling a retreat at this point, because the troops that would be saved from the effort would have been useless to fight another day against the Reapers by themselves. In fact, the time when Coates calls off the retreat is actually the best time to continue the assault, because Harbinger actually leaves the premises immediately when Coates issues the command. So calling a retreat order at this time is pretty much making a mission failed situation. So right now is quite literally a free, straight shot for everybody to make it to the beam unscathed. Anybody sitting at the top could see that. A single soldier could easily make it down unassisted now that there aren't any Reaper forces still there defending it, save for Marauder shields and the 3 Musketeers. But do you know what makes this even more interesting? Harbinger leaves right when Coates gives the order to retreat. It's almost like Harbinger could hear the radio command and flew off. Almost like he was expecting it, like it was planned. This is the big issue here. What makes Harbinger so confident that Coates won't reverse his order and reissue the assault as soon as he sees Harbinger leaving? Like I said in the first documentary, a Reaper as smart as Harbinger must surely realize that now the target is completely vulnerable. This plot hole can easily be explained away by saying that Major Coates has been indoctrinated this whole time and is simply following orders. He's the reason Harbinger and the Reaper forces always knew where the current Alliance forces were located all the time while they were on London. He's the reason Harbinger knew to drop in at the correct time to defend the beam. Coates being indoctrinated actually makes a lot of sense when you start to dissect the storyline here at the end and look at what has been happening. Despite the fact that this part of the game is now a dream according to the indoctrination theory, it still makes sense that Shepard would be able to hear the radio, and therefore the fact that Coates is calling off a retreat could still be happening in reality. Shepard was still transitioning into the dream when he heard the transmission as well. But because this is all speculation, and somewhat redundant speculation at that, this is still getting another plausible. Now, I actually have 2 more pieces of evidence regarding Coates, huge ones no less, but I'm saving them until we get to those parts. But don't worry, we'll get there. Okay, so now it's time to charge down the hill. Wait, I'm getting a weird sense of deja vu for some reason. Whatever, this first one is small, but it's something to think about. It may, once again, just be another example of poor writing skills on the part of the BioWare staff, but it's still something to note and it's still a plot hole nonetheless. The beam to the Citadel contradicts all Mass Effect technology. Aside from the mass relays, there isn't any other type of instant transport technology that exists in the entire trilogy. So far, the mass relays are quite literally the only things that are capable of such a feat. Even the teleport beam located on Ilos at the end of Mass Effect 1 was a mini version of a mass relay, which is why they were able to teleport anything in the first place. This beam, however, is nothing but just that, a mysterious magical beam. Again, however, this doesn't really affect the indoctrination theory in any way, but also again, it's another interesting piece of information to note regardless. And because one could say that it might be possible for the Citadel to produce such a beam, considering it was just able to jump through a mass relay on its own, I'm willing to give this a weak plausible and just leave it at that. Another small yet interesting aspect about this scene that suddenly occurred to me while drafting notes for this documentary is that the player can stand perfectly still and or even walk around aimlessly on the hill for as long as they want to without getting shot by Harbinger. Seriously, go try it. It's actually rather amusing. The critic in me here wants to counter with, but wait, that's just another game mechanic, duh. However, the critic in me is wrong, because as soon as Shepard gets up from being hit by the beam, the opposite is true. Stand around long enough and Shepard will suddenly collapse and die. Same goes for while you're inside the decision chamber room. Well, actually, the decision chamber room is based around your location rather than the time limit. Meaning, if you walk to a certain choice but then turn around to come back, Shepard will die. So, if the developers put these deaths in on both of these maps and situations, then why is it suddenly impractical for it to have not been implemented while rushing the beam? It certainly seems like a risk that should have been implemented, considering the fact that Harbinger is blasting the hell out of everything and everyone around Shepard like nobody's business. So it's not a matter of not being able to hit Shepard or anything. I personally find this very interesting, because it lends more evidence to the idea that Harbinger was deliberately trying to avoid Shepard until he got close enough. Perhaps he just wanted to save Shepard for last, or perhaps it's because he can't directly control somebody if there are other people distracting him and attacking him. Or perhaps it's because Harbinger didn't want to kill Shepard with the blast, and doing so with the current strength that he was using on everybody else would have killed Shepard. Honestly, any and all of those possibilities seem like they could very well be true, as they fit in perfectly with Harbinger's prior motives. A Reaper generally doesn't go back on their word, and as we learned from the Starchild, they're merely programmed to act this way, so when Harbinger tells Shepard in the Arrival DLC that your mind will be ours, then he means he's not gonna stop until he accomplishes that goal. And this is him carrying out that goal, but for the reasons listed above, he couldn't attack Shepard right away while he was charging down the hill. What lends even more to this idea is the fact that Harbinger does not shoot at Shepard's squad mates until they have been separated from Shepard, but as soon as they are separated, it's almost an instantaneous thing. It coincides perfectly with the evidence given a moment ago, as Harbinger wouldn't have been able to get off a clean shot on the squad mates so long as they were standing next to Shepard. If you get the ending where the squad mates survive, then Harbinger just hits a Mako tank hard enough to make it flip over the now protected Shepard and explode upon the other two squad mates. Seems even more like a possibility now, right? Well, even more so when you examine the low EMS version of this scene where the squad mates actually die. In this version, the same thing happens, except Harbinger actually hits a bullseye on the squad mates after they dodge the Mako tank. They're far enough away from Shepard now to be attacked, and Harbinger even aims his laser behind the squad mates first and then drags it toward them. Normally, Harbinger and all the other Reapers just aim the laser running toward their target from in front of them, but because Shepard was nearby, Harbinger decided to start the strike from behind the squad mates so as to lessen the chance of killing Shepard. Harbinger even immediately stops his laser strike as soon as Shepard gets close enough to where he could start being affected by the heat and radiation of the blast, and then Shepard is immediately blown back to the safety of the flipped Mako tank for a brief moment. If Harbinger was really trying to kill Shepard, why wouldn't he just strike the Mako tank Shepard was hiding behind and continue the strike all the way up to his teammates? It's not like Harbinger thought that the Mako tank would have served as a shield between the squad mates and the laser, as nothing can stop that laser or even weaken its blow, not even an Alliance dreadnought as we've seen in the past. If anything, it would have made more sense for Harbinger to strike the flipped Mako tank again, just for the sake of ensuring that nobody could use it as cover, just like Shepard was doing. But Harbinger saw Shepard run behind it, and therefore aimed and timed his attacks to avoid hurting Shepard altogether. To recap, the reason Harbinger isn't attacking Shepard is because he doesn't want to kill him, but he can't begin the indoctrination process until everybody else is dead and or until Shepard is close enough to Harbinger. It also makes sense that because of how wide the beam is, Harbinger might accidentally hit one of the squad mates with the indoctrination beam, which is why he never attacks Shepard until they're far enough away from him. Simply put, Harbinger needs Shepard alive in order to successfully begin the indoctrination attempt, or rather to assume direct control over Shepard. To me, this is another confirm, because Harbinger had plenty of opportunities, easier ones no less, to hit the squad mates and Shepard along with them well before he actually did, but he waited until they were separated from Shepard for the reasons I just mentioned. This next one has become quite a big debate among theorists and critics alike, but it's actually rather hard to argue against. What is it? It's when Harbinger completely stops attacking everybody altogether during the high EMS ending as Shepard is evacuating the injured squad mates onto the Normandy. Literally, Harbinger just stops firing and politely waits for them to leave before resuming his attack. This, once again, lends to the idea mentioned moments ago that Harbinger doesn't want to kill Shepard, and therefore cannot attack anybody else if Shepard is standing close enough to them. Attacking the Normandy at this time would certainly cause the entire ship to explode, therefore killing Shepard along with the rest of his crew. What's even more interesting is that Harbinger actually stops firing completely. You don't even hear or see the laser strikes happening in the background during this evacuation scene. The troops are still firing, but Harbinger just sits and waits almost like he is watching the scene unraveling and is quite literally waiting for Shepard to continue. It makes sense when you consider the fact that Harbinger has already been basing his attacks around Shepard this entire time, so why would he stop now? Now, the only counter-argument for this theory is that, as most of you know, the Normandy has a Reaper IFF aboard that they obtained during Mass Effect 2. This Reaper IFF outputs a signal into space that makes other Reapers and Reaper units perceive it as friendly, In case you were wondering, this is the reason that the Normandy isn't attacked at all during Mass Effect 3 while flying around when there are a bunch of Reapers everywhere in space. However, there's a huge flaw in this counter-argument. The Reaper IFF only outputs a signal. It's purely based around space transportation and doesn't work if a Reaper is standing right next to the Normandy. The Reaper IFF doesn't cloak the Normandy or change its appearance, much like how the Normandy's stealth mode doesn't cloak it either. Remember when you're gallivanting around in different solar systems in Mass Effect 3, how if you output too many scans, the Reapers come and visit, and then they try and chase you? Well, up until that point, they didn't notice you there until you started to put those scans out to get the Reapers to come, but when they actually are within eyesight of the Normandy, then the chase begins. As I said, it only outputs a signal, which is only effective when the Normandy was far enough away from something that it couldn't be seen by the naked eye, but is close enough to something that its presence can be detected. If you remember in Mass Effect 2, the Normandy also had the Reaper IFF aboard while they were being attacked by the Oculi, a Reaper fighter jet type thing, and the reason they attacked the Normandy is because they were quite literally right on top of the Normandy when it happened. So getting back to this scene, Harbinger was standing right next to the Normandy, and therefore could see it as plain as day with his own 6 ugly yellow eyes that it wasn't another friendly Reaper. Therefore, we are back at square one again with this piece of evidence. Why didn't Harbinger attack the Normandy? Well, I believe the answer is clear, because doing so would have killed Shepard. Shepard was standing close enough to the Normandy at all times that he would have been killed by the huge blast that it would have caused. Even when the Normandy lifts off, Harbinger still doesn't attack it because it's hovering right over Shepard, and the debris would have easily killed him. Perhaps even the explosion itself, as the Normandy is a rather large vessel. When the Normandy starts to move away, however, there's no reason for Harbinger to attack the Normandy anymore, as it's now moving away from the battle, rather than towards it, and Harbinger needs to focus on the enemies coming right at him, not the ones running away from him. So I think it's a pretty safe bet to give this piece of evidence another confirmed, as I have yet to hear about and have not been able to come up with any reasonable explanation as to why Harbinger doesn't attack the Normandy, except for the argument that it's because he doesn't want to kill Shepard. Like I said, confirmed. This next piece of evidence has been causing quite the stir among Mass Effect fans. It's the Servus evidence. It's either an undeniable truth that the indoctrination theory is true, or a baffling example of just how horrible the writers and sound staff over at BioWare have become. Let's figure out which one it is, shall we? So, first of all, the evidence is that right before Shepard gets hit with Harbinger's laser, Harbinger makes a noise we've never heard any Reaper make before, and it sounds almost exactly like the words Servus. Actually, come to think of it, we have heard this line before, in the background noises of the dream sequences. Believe it or not, this exact soundbite can be found there, although it is never really heard by the player during any of the dream sequences, so extracting the sound file from those scenes reveals that this line is actually present. How coincidental! This wasn't present before the Extended Cut DLC in the actual ending, however it was present during the dream sequence, but why was it added in now? Well, first things first, we need to put this into perspective. It sounds a lot like Harbinger is saying Servus, but is he actually? Playing with the subtitles on reveals no lines are present when Harbinger says this, and other versions of the game with different languages have the exact same sound in place. Why would the French version of Mass Effect have Harbinger still saying Servus in English? Well, I guess that's because it's not a word, but rather a sound instead. But come on, are you kidding me? Were the developers and the sound staff that airheaded once again to make a monumentally misleading piece of evidence such as this? Or perhaps it is another piece of evidence that was deliberately placed in there in order to stir up more controversy. I mean, how could the developers not foresee this causing a hell of a lot of controversy? Or if not the developers as a whole, then the sound staff. It's probably because they did foresee it, and that's why it was placed into the game. They were trying to appeal to both sides with the Extended Cut DLC, like I said during my informal analysis, and this is one of those things that they just tossed in there to stir up the pot even more. At face value, this piece of evidence seems absolutely, mind-blowingly amazing. However, after realizing that it might actually just be a soundbite after all, rather than actual words, then we're kind of all left sitting here with a WTF were they thinking look on our faces. Let's face it, most people so badly wanted for this piece of evidence to be confirmed. but it just isn't because of these facts. You could argue that it was a custom-made sound file, and that's why it wasn't translated or given subtitles, but it was already in the game during the dream sequences prior to the Extended Cut DLC, so it's not like they made it specifically for this DLC. Like I said again, how coincidental. But that's just it, just a coincidence. And a really disappointing and misleading one at that. Believe it or not, I can't even justify giving this piece of evidence a plausible. It has to get a red X just because of everything I've already said. It's frustratingly misleading, and BioWare sure knows how to troll their fan base like no other company ever before. But I'm afraid that's the stark reality with this piece of evidence. While Harbinger may not be saying serve us, I believe there's still significance to the fact that there is any noise at all being made prior to Shepard being hit. Harbinger has never paused, spoke, and then attacked somebody. No Reapers do that. In fact, not a single one of them has ever done that. Every Reaper we've ever seen has just immediately, without hesitation, killed on sight every single enemy it has ever come across. So why did Harbinger stop before attacking Shepard, make that weird noise which we've only heard in Shepard's dreams, and then proceed to strike Shepard? It's out of the ordinary for a Reaper in general to do this, let alone Harbinger. If he was merely trying to kill Shepard like the rest, there would be absolutely no reason to have a change of pace. It would have just been brrr, boom, dead. But instead we get this brief pause and secret noise. It could be one of two things. Harbinger acknowledging Shepard's presence and therefore speaking to him in Reaper tongue, or however you want to call it. Perhaps addressing him or laughing at him, or anything really. Just acknowledging the fact that Shepard is there, since Shepard is significant. Or it could be an indication that Harbinger is actually trying to indoctrinate Shepard through this different method of attack. Perhaps the noise was caused by Harbinger shifting gears, so to speak, to go into indoctrination mode. I'm sure that's not how it works at all, but that's the layman's understanding of the point that I'm trying to make. It's very possible that this noise is an indication that something is different about this attack versus all the other attacks he's been producing this entire time. Whether it be an extra powerful attempt to ensure that Shepard dies, which, by the way, if that were the case, then there's no doubt Shepard would have been already dead, as he should be after being hit, or perhaps it's an indication, like I said, that Harbinger is switching things up and going for indoctrination rather than the kill. I'll give the fact that there is even a change of pace for Harbinger at this point an honest plausible, because there's really no way to be sure whether or not I'm right about this. There is, however, another interesting soundbite that happens right at the same time as the serve us line. Well, it's immediately after that line if you want to get technical. It's the ringing noise you hear as the laser approaches Shepard. Why aren't we hearing the usual Reaper laser noise? I mean, we do eventually hear the typical Reaper laser sound, but it isn't until after Shepard has already been hit with the laser. Why is the sound out of sync here all of a sudden? Is this just another bad example of the poor sound staff over at BioWare? And why is there an additional ringing noise that takes place right as the laser approaches Shepard? What's more, we hear similar ringing noises the entire time after Shepard gets up from being hit. Perhaps those sounds are just from having Shepard just being struck by, a laser. But that still doesn't explain this ringing noise to begin with. Is it meant to be an actual environmental noise? Is it meant to be something that is representing the sudden sting of fear Shepard is feeling over seeing the laser head right for him? That sounds like a possibility, but honestly, I'm not sure if I buy it as a valid explanation or not. But once again, because this is speculation here, and there's no way to definitively prove whether or not the sound is an indication of indoctrination or just Shepard's fear creeping in on him, this one gets another plausible. But now it's time once again for the Citadel, and not much has changed save for a few new observations. As soon as Shepard pops out of the transport beam, something rather peculiar happens. No, really, that's the evidence. Something happens to Shepard, because nobody really knows exactly what it is. Basically, Shepard undergoes what I can only describe as a neural shock, because that's exactly what it looks like. Shepard flies out of the transport beam like a popcorn kernel exploding onto a hot pan, and then slams right into the ground, lies dormant for a moment, and then looks and sounds like he just got shocked with a kettle prod. No, but seriously, it looks like Shepard is waking up from a bad dream or something. What's even weirder is the sound we hear as soon as Shepard wakes up or receives his jolt. It's kind of like a mental jolt rather than a physical one though. What's more, Shepard even begins to smoke for a few seconds. This one is seriously up for debate because anybody's guess is as good as mine, honestly. However, one of the things I can guarantee you that it's not is a personal defibrillator, like a lot of critics have been saying. First of all, if personal defibrillators existed in this game, then why the hell didn't we get to use it earlier? Do you know how many times I could have used that thing during my Insanity playthrough? On a serious note, there has never been any mention over the course of this 5-year series of this type of technology being implemented into a defensive piece of armor. If there had been, then we simply would have seen it before. There have been a large number of characters who have died under similar circumstances, or other circumstances that would have called for a personal defibrillator, yet nothing ever happened like this before. If the technology does exist, then it's not like Shepard would be the only person with access to this technology either, as not even Shepard's squad mates who have died throughout the series have had access to it, nor have any prominent military leaders that should have had them. Anderson, anybody? Furthermore, and I stated this in the last documentary, that the heat from Harbinger's blast would have immediately fried any electronic equipment inside Shepard's suit. It's the same reason Shepard's shield generator isn't working anymore, because it's fried. So if Shepard's shield generator is no longer operational, which is something that is far more technologically advanced, then there is absolutely no reason that a personal defibrillator, if he even has one, should be working. What's more, I'm assuming this mythical personal defibrillator is powered somehow, isn't it? Presumably battery operated or operated by some kind of similar energy source. I'm no physics major, but contained units of energy generally don't respond well to extreme sources of heat. Have you ever read that warning label on your pack of batteries? I don't care how advanced the technology is in this series, there's just not any type of personal defibrillator or radio or any type of personal device that can withstand that type of heat. It's just not possible. Deal with it. Okay, so I've established that it's not any type of personal defibrillator or any other type of unit that is resurrecting Shepard. For example, Metagel, which, by the way, if it was Metagel, then it didn't do the Metagel being dispersed sound that it usually does. Not to mention that, once again, at those temperatures, any Metagel dispenser should be fried. If it's nothing physically reactivating Shepard, then what is it? This is why I said your guess is as good as mine, because it seriously can't be anything physical. If it were, then we would have yet another plot hole on our hands. And this is the biggest plot hole yet in that case. If you really want my personal take on this, I believe Shepard's will was about to give in back while he was laying in the pile of rubble, and then Shepard's drive and dedication to the mission, represented by Anderson, as I said in the last documentary, woke him up, for a lack of a better phrase. Now, if you've been mentally zoning in and out throughout this entire documentary, now is the time to pay attention, because if you notice, Shepard doesn't have this neural shock until Anderson says his name. They're simultaneous. Watch the scene again.
Shepard.
Anderson says Shepard then, within the very next second, and we hear this weird noise that can only be described as a neural or mental shock of some sort, and then Shepard gets up. It simply cannot be a coincidence that Anderson speaks Shepard's name, and then Shepard immediately gets up alongside this very eerie noise. It just isn't a coincidence, not this time. This is something significant, because there's absolutely no way that the developers coincidentally made it so that Anderson seemed to wake Shepard up. The timing and situation just makes it too perfect to be just another coincidence. No, Anderson actually did wake Shepard up, because Anderson during this scene is actually a representation of Shepard's subconscious will. Yet another piece of evidence that falls into place absolutely perfectly with the rest of the theory. But hang on a second, what about the smoke? There's a bunch of smoke coming off of Shepard's body when this happens, and then it dissipates after a few seconds. A lot of people thought that this was major evidence supporting the idea that it's just a pacemaker, but those things actually don't produce smoke at all. Neither do Metagel. Furthermore, Shepard was already smoking prior to this happening, and defibrillators only take a split second to operate. My guess is that it's because Shepard's armor is, charred and everything, so it makes perfect sense for it to be smoking a bit. My second guess is that somehow the transport beam is causing the smoke. To me, this is another confirmed, because there's no way that Shepard's neural shock is happening due to anything physical trying to resuscitate Shepard. Shepard was already smoking the second he comes out of the beam. There's an eerie sound that happens right when he comes to, and he doesn't wake up until Anderson says Shepard's name. Next is one of those interesting pieces about Coates that I said we would go over later. Well, now it's later. Basically, Coates is on the Citadel during this scene. Dead. Dead as a doorknob. Dead as a cat in the road. Dead as a Christmas tree in the middle of July. I don't know. He's dead, okay? Don't believe me? Well, it's the truth. There's a brand new cutscene that shows a keeper taking off the helmet of a soldier who has their face hidden by a bunch of other dead bodies. However, once again thanks to Pretzel and his flycam, it turns out that this body is actually Major Coates. Weird, right? Well, it's very possible that the reason they hid his face is because they don't want to make it obvious that it's actually him. Getting a lot more Dream-esque now, isn't it? As we all know by now, Coates never died, so what is he doing here? Even if he did die all of a sudden, there's absolutely no way that a Reaper minion carried his body up the beam before Shepard finished getting up there. That just didn't happen, so why is his body here? Most likely because it's just a dream. Makes sense to me. However, there are a few unanswered questions here. First of all, why Coates? Well, a lot of people believe that it's due to the fact that Coates is the only soldier model present during the end of the game who is capable of wearing a helmet, as all the other soldiers we've seen have berets on. Therefore, they believe that BioWare put Coates' character model in and hid his face in order to make him look like a generic soldier losing his helmet. However, there are a few problems with this counter-argument. First of all, Coates never wore a helmet that could be taken off in the first place, meaning that they would have had to make a new character model, or rather adjust the one that already existed for this scene to give him a helmet. So if they took the time to make an altered character model of Coates, why didn't they just make an altered character model for one of the beret soldiers and put a helmet on them instead? This way they would have avoided any definite controversies such as this. Now, the other problem with this counter-argument is that Coates isn't the only soldier on London capable of having a helmet. There's this guy propped up against the rock here with no helmet on at all that they could have used. Why not him? He's your typical generic soldier, they gave him a unique character model, and he doesn't have a helmet. It's not like we would have recognized him as the guy laying against the rock had we seen him twice. If BioWare was really just trying to show a generic soldier losing his helmet, why not use this guy instead, considering the fact that he's actually a generic soldier, like I said? But that's not all. What about all the soldiers rushing the beam alongside Shepard earlier? They all had helmets, and in fact, none of them wore any berets. Obviously, it was just the same character model repeated over and over again, but why didn't they just use that one instead? It's not like BioWare is at a loss for people with helmets on here to choose from. We just watched Harbinger roast a few dozen of them, so why not use their character models instead as a generic soldier, since they're even more generic looking than the guy propped up against the rock, and because we just watched them all die, so it makes sense for them to be aboard the Citadel. This proves that there was absolutely no reason to use the Coates model here in this scene, unless they wanted it to be Coates. The logic here is pretty simple. If I'm wrong, then this probably is how the conversation went. Hey guys, we quickly need to grab a generic soldier model to put in this new scene. Okay, here's one that matches exactly what we need. Oh look, here's another one that we can use. Nah, screw that guys, let's use Coates and put a helmet on him. Then let's hide his face a little so people have a hard time telling who he is. Genius! Doesn't sound very smart, does it? Look, I've lost a lot of faith in the BioWare development staff over the last few months, but not enough to believe that they actually would make a process as simple as this that much harder on themselves, and simultaneously piss off the indoctrination theorists at the same time. They understood the implications of having Coates' character model aboard the Citadel in the first place, and they understood how much easier it would have been just to use one of the already usable generic character models instead that had helmets. At the same time, it's pretty obvious that they tried everything they could to hide all of the important features of Coates' face that would have made somebody jump and go, "That's Coates!" upon first glance. All we really see is his hair and forehead, which, granted, no other soldier has had that hair so far in London, but that's not saying much. If you pause it at the right frame, I believe you can also make out part of his eye, but that's not much either. But what's even more interesting is that this entire scene vanishes as soon as Shepard starts walking. The Keeper and Coates were both physically present in the same map during this scene as Shepard, meaning that had Shepard gotten up and started walking, we would have been able to see Coates laying there plain as day. However, they just removed it right before we could see it with our own eyes. This is rather disconcerting because why else would BioWare go through all the trouble of creating and then removing a part of the map for a simple 3-second clip unless they were truly trying to hide it from us? But can BioWare really be this dumb? I hate to be so harsh with my words, but that's the only appropriate adjective here. Dumb. Had they used one of the other character models, then they could have just made the scene, not needed to hide the guy's face, not needed to add a custom helmet, and then just leave him there, right on the map. It would have actually enhanced the entire map to begin with, and it would have saved them an hour or two of work, and we wouldn't need to have this conversation. However, there is a saving grace here about the fact that they're going through all the trouble to hide him, the fact that BioWare likes to draw from prior DLC packages for a new one. Say they come out with an Indoctrination Theory confirmed DLC later into the future as soon as they're done making money with the rest of the DLC, which is a very strong possibility. They could simply then just reveal this part in full rather than making it disappear, and then people would freak out everywhere and go, "I can't believe I didn't see that the first time!" So in short, they could be saving it for a big reveal later on down the road, and we just weren't supposed to find it yet. They've done it before with other DLC containing parts for future DLC, so it makes sense that they would do it again. In fact, this extended cut DLC was the largest DLC ever produced by BioWare in the Mass Effect series in terms of file size, 1.85 gigabytes to be exact, yet it was one of the shortest DLC in terms of content. Do you remember how long the Layer of the Shadow Broker DLC was? Yeah, well, it was even larger than that by about 0.30 gigabytes. And Layer of the Shadow Broker contained hours of gameplay, a unique driving sequence, a wide array of new maps, and a few seconds of cutscenes. A lot of critics have said that the large file size of the Extended Cut DLC is because of the new cutscenes that have been added. But take it from a video editor. Those videos are simply too short to justify a file size of nearly 2 gigabytes. Take all of the new video cutscenes added in with the Extended Cut DLC, and I'm betting that they only average out to somewhere around 1 gigabyte or so in size, if even that, because in total they were only about 5 minutes long. Just to give you a point of reference, this first documentary I produced took up 10 gigabytes in size and it was nearly 80 minutes in length. That means for the same level of high quality, which by the way was made up entirely of the same graphics BioWare produced, that the documentary was only 0.125 gigabytes per minute. I'll be generous and say that the new Extended Cut DLC added in about 10 minutes worth of cutscenes total, even though, like I said, I'm pretty sure it was more like 5. At that average that I pointed out, this only gives 1.25 gigabytes total of size taken for roughly 10 minutes of cutscenes. And remember, it's probably only 50 to 75% of that in reality, because I was being very generous to the critics with this. Even if it really is 1.25 gigabytes in size, that still leaves us with 0.60 gigabytes of space left over that BioWare put in. Let's see, there were no new encounters or battles, there were not any new maps, no new areas to discover, etc. So what was in that 0.60 gigabytes of space? It definitely wasn't filled up with those picture montages, let me tell you that much. Stilled images just do not take that much space. This proves that BioWare has something in this Extended Cut DLC that we're just not seeing yet, that they will likely reveal at a later date with another DLC later on down the road. And remember when the Leviathan DLC was just a rumor? Well, that rumor came from the Extended Cut DLC files that someone stumbled upon, therefore proving that BioWare does in fact put things in past DLCs that are meant for future ones. I'm not saying that the Extended Cut DLC has any explicit undiscovered content that will be used for an Indoctrination DLC, although that certainly is a possibility, but my entire point with this is the idea that it makes perfect sense now for BioWare to cover up Coates' face only to want to reveal it at a later date, just like they did with the Leviathan DLC script that was in the Extended Cut DLC, which we now know is a real DLC. So with that in mind, I feel like I can honestly give this piece of evidence a confirmed. Since this was a pretty long point, let me break it down for you. It's because they could have used another pre-made character model that existed and had a helmet instead of Coates. They would have saved time and effort in doing so, but instead they mysteriously chose Coates, who obviously has no business being aboard the Citadel unless this is in fact a dream. And they may be waiting to reveal Coates on the Citadel in a later DLC just like they did with the Leviathan DLC. So yes, confirmed, albeit this one is about as close to treading water between plausible and confirmed as possible. This next piece of evidence is a slam dunk in my opinion, and while this isn't something new by any means, it certainly is a new observation that syncs up with a previously stated piece of evidence and makes it that slam dunk. It's the piece of evidence surrounding Anderson being present on the Citadel when he shouldn't be. As we all know from the other documentaries, there's absolutely no reason to be on the Citadel in the first place. To recap the other documentaries, he never stormed down the hill with Shepard and the rest of the crew because we never see him. If he was there, he would have stayed close to Shepard's side, and he would have stopped with Shepard during the scene where the squad mates are hit. Speaking of the squad mates, we actually see them charging down the hill with us, because they were there. Yet Anderson is nowhere to be found. As stated earlier, he claims he followed us in, yet if that's true, then why is he ahead of Shepard already? As I also proved in the last documentary, this is impossible because there was only one exit from the warp beam, and that's exactly where Shepard landed. But that's where the argument got a little slippery last time, because critics were saying that you can't prove it was the single location warp and Anderson still could have come out at a different place closer to the control panel. Fine, I'll give you guys that, but only if you can explain to me why we never saw Anderson charge down the hill, and that if he came in after us, how he's ahead of us. But not only that, I'll see your argument and raise you this counter-argument. If you're right, then we should still be able to see Anderson on the map aboard the Citadel. This seriously bothered me during the Extended Cut DLC after it finally dawned on me. We simply should be able to see Anderson if he is where he says he is. According to the radio, Anderson is always one step ahead of Shepard, yet as soon as the doors open from the room Shepard landed in, we have a very clear view of the entire walkway up to the control panel and can even see the entire control panel itself if you stand at the correct angle. Guess what? There's no Anderson there. In fact, there's no Anderson anywhere. When he says, "I think I see something up ahead, might be a way to cross over," he's referring to that walkway with the 1M1 symbols on it, yet we don't see Anderson walking there at all. I mean, what else could it be? The room that the confrontation between Anderson, Shepard, and the Elusive Man takes place in only has one entrance, the one Shepard came in through. So Anderson didn't just walk in from another point, he quite literally just magically appears there. But it gets even weirder. As soon as you're done climbing the walkway and see Anderson standing at the control panel, I want you to stop, turn around, and walk back to where you just came from. If you do that and look back, the control panel is visible from this angle like it was before, but Anderson is no longer present. You can see the inner circle on the control panel and even the lower orange part of the control panel from far away. When you're up close and Anderson is actually there, Anderson is covering both of those parts. So we should be able to see him from our far away angle according to that, shouldn't we? It's not like these are two different maps here. It's quite literally the exact same map, but Anderson is appearing and disappearing based on where Shepard is standing. This is not just a game mechanic, because there have been plenty of times during the game where a character would be far away, but would still remain visible on the map, because they're a part of the map now, plain and simple. It's not like the environments have one set visibility limit with characters having another. It just doesn't happen like that. Now, in a game like World of Warcraft, this is a common occurrence due to server connectivity issues, but not on a game like Mass Effect where all the data needed is already present and readily available at a moment's notice on the disk. This means that BioWare quite literally made a unique exception in this case, where they had Anderson appear and disappear based on where Shepard is standing. Why? Unless it was to further push the idea that Shepard is just in the middle of a hallucination, then there's no reason to do the extra mapping work. It contradicts the way the developers have been mapping the entire series, so it can't just be a simple coincidence. But the point here is that this new finding only further enhances the previous argument of Anderson not actually existing on the Citadel, but rather being a part of Shepard's imagination. So let's recap the evidence of this point. Shepard doesn't wake up until he hears Anderson. Anderson couldn't have possibly followed up Shepard because he was already ahead of Shepard when Shepard came in. Further, there was only one warp out location to begin with from the beam. Then there's all the evidence from the last two documentaries explaining if how Anderson followed Shepard up, then he should have no injuries because Harbinger flew away already, and Anderson would have really had to have been far behind Shepard since we didn't see him charge the hill at all. Then there's the evidence also shown previously that Shepard receives the same wound in the same place as Anderson, even though Shepard isn't shot at all. Shepard grunts along with Anderson when Anderson is being shot. Anderson is addressing Shepard at all times during the conversation with the Elusive Man according to the game's script files and according to the fact that Anderson actually makes eye contact with Shepard when talking, not the Elusive Man. Then the obvious dualities of how Anderson stands for everything the protagonist of the series has stood for, and the Elusive Man stands for the opposite. Then there's the evidence of the shadows presented earlier to suggest that the Elusive Man and Anderson aren't really there, while Shepard's shadow remains correct at all times. And now, finally, we have this new piece of evidence showing how Anderson disappears from the map completely after a certain point. With all of this at hand, I can say with absolute certainty that Anderson during this scene of the game is just a representation of Shepard's will to fight, and is simply a figment of his imagination, just like the entire ending is. Is there a word for something even more confirmed than the word confirmed? Because that's what this is, irrefutably confirmed. Now, moving on up to the decision chamber. There are some subtle changes and some rather large ones, in addition to some new observations about things that were already there. The first one isn't new with the Extended Cut DLC, however, it's something I noticed that has not been covered by anybody else as of yet for whatever reason. Pay attention to Shepard's voice in the decision chamber room. Shepard's voice has a dreamlike echo in this room, and it's not your typical regular big room echo.
But you're taking away our future. Without a future, we have no hope. Without hope, we might as well be machines, programmed to do what we're told.
The room Shepard was in before while talking to the elusive man and Anderson was definitely big enough to produce an echo, yet it didn't. Further, as I said, this is more than just an echo. It sounds ethereal and almost like, gee, I don't know, a dream. Now, I realize how incredibly subjective this piece of evidence is, and because of that, it's going to get snagged with the plausible. However, it's up to you to listen to Shepard and decide whether or not it sounds like a normal echo or something different. Now it's time to get on a bit of a roll here, as the next few pieces of evidence interlock together but are also separate points at the exact same time. However, the overall point I'm trying to prove with these next few pieces of evidence is this. The Star Child is a Reaper, or at the very least, has a Reaper agenda and thus cannot be trusted. First things first, nobody would design the Crucible with 3 separate options. That is, unless the people who designed it were the Reapers or their makers. It was believed during the game, note believed, not proven by any means, that another race made the Crucible design and passed those designs down from cycle to cycle. However, if this is true, then it makes 0 sense whatsoever. If the Crucible was created in an effort to stop the Reapers, then the only option would have been destroy. There would have been no need for synthesis or control. It's the simple laws of survival. Now, the Star Child tries to tell Shepard that past cycles actually added on to the Crucible and added on these extra options. However, as I just explained, that doesn't make any sense, because if there's a cycle trying to stop the Reapers, then destroy is simply the only option. My point? The race that originally created the Crucible design wasn't any race that the Reapers were harvesting in a past cycle, but it was actually the race that created the Reapers themselves. They are the ones responsible for the Crucible and the Citadel. Oh, and the Keepers? I believe those are some type of turned version of the original race. Who else better to watch over the Citadel than the ones who originally created it? I doubt the Reapers would have found another race worthy enough to do that. However, the important thing here is that I believe the Crucible was made as a failsafe should anything go wrong, and it clearly did. However, they just didn't build it in time. It's possible the Reapers had already been created by then and turned between the time that the Citadel was completed and the time it took to finish the Crucible. It's possible that the original creators themselves thought synthesis might actually be a great idea and also put in the option to control them in case they go rogue, and then finally put in the destroy option in case everything else failed. Makes perfect sense to have those 3 options now when you consider it in this light, doesn't it? So why didn't the Reapers just destroy the plans if they contained a way for them to be destroyed? The Star Child claims that it's because they simply didn't know the plans still existed, but do you really believe that? Perhaps it's because it also held the potential for the Reapers to ascend, something they have clearly wanted since the beginning of Mass Effect 1. So the Reapers kept it around cycle after cycle until they found a race worthy of using it to synthesize with. And clearly the human race is worthy enough, as they have tested the human race plenty of times during Mass Effect 2 and deemed them worthy. And since Shepard is the bastion of humanity, it makes sense for them to want Shepard to become one of them, as they have already tried to do in the past. This might have sounded very confusing, and to some of you, it may have even sounded like I'm actually providing a piece of evidence that supports the endings at face value, but I'm not. The point to take away is this. Nobody would create the Crucible in an attempt to stop the Reapers, because if they had, it would have only contained destroy. Nobody except for the people who first created the Reapers, that is. Therefore, since we can assume that the Reapers' creators are the ones who also created the Crucible and the Citadel, then we can also assume that the Reapers already know about the Crucible plans and therefore left them alone due to the fact that they contain the synthesis option. Something, as I said, the Reapers have been directly talking about over the course of the series. But at the same time, this is proving that the Reapers have a heavy bias toward the synthesis option should any organic race ever reach it. And guess what? Indoctrination theory or not, the Reapers still have that agenda because it shows in how the Star Child tries to sway Shepard to pick synthesis. Not to mention the fact that we've never heard of these three options before. Well, with the exception of destroy, of course. Note the fact that the Citadel itself contains half of these options. The Crucible merely charges them. My point is, how did none of the other races that had been living on the Citadel during this cycle not notice these things protruding out of the core of the Citadel? Didn't they ever take the time to explore it or wonder what they are? And if so, how come we'd never heard about it? Wouldn't that be one of the biggest mysteries of the series, had it existed prior? I mean, it was attached to the Citadel Tower, which is one of the most prominent parts of the Citadel, so it's not like this is some far-off undiscovered area that they had never noticed before. They had plenty of time to see these options exist. Even further, look at the size of the Crucible. You mean to tell me that this mammoth of a machine is operated by an area that takes up maybe 1% of its entire size? Doubtful. My point here is that because the writers obviously wrote in the purpose of the Crucible and the connecting area within the Citadel out on a whim at the very end of the game during a rush time limit, they can very easily dismiss it away by saying it was just a convenient idea put into place by the Reapers inside Shepard's head. Which explains why we've never heard of any of this to begin with. I mean, honestly, nobody working on the Crucible ever mentioned anything about, it seems like there are 3 significant parts to the Crucible, but they all seem to do different things. There wasn't so much as even a small mention about any of it. However, because I'm making heavy assumptions here, albeit the assumption is based on the facts and laws of survival, about the origin of the Crucible, I'll give this one a strong plausible. So your head is probably spinning after that one. I recommend rewinding and watching that part again if you had a hard time following me there before we proceed. The Extended Cut DLC proves that the Star Child is a Reaper and or has a Reaper agenda, as I said. Why? First and most notably is because of the new refusal ending that has been added in. You've more than likely heard about this by now or have stumbled upon it by yourself. If not, here's what it is. The refusal ending is a brand new ending that was implemented with the Extended Cut DLC, and it triggers when Shepard either refuses, as the name implies, to go along with the Star Child's options through the dialogue wheel, or by shooting the Star Child right between the eyes after the dialogue is over. It's so rewarding to do so, isn't it? Anyway, in this new ending, the Star Child says, "So be it," in a very obvious Reaper voice.
So be it.
And then everybody dies and the cycles continue, ending with a very brief cutscene showing Liara as a VI warning the future cycle about the Reapers. I believe this ending proves that the Star Child is in fact a Reaper, because AI simply just don't change their voices like that. Furthermore, even if they can, the fact that the Star Child deliberately withheld that voice until now shows that he's been trying to persuade Shepard with friendly voices and faces to appear less intimidating and evil. In reality, if the Star Child is capable of making that voice, why not use it the entire time? Because he doesn't want to start off on the wrong foot with Shepard, so he uses a voice Shepard is okay with hearing. But in doing so, the Star Child is hiding something. He's hiding his real form, which now seems even more than ever to be a Reaper influencing Shepard's mind while he's laying there in London. Not to mention this side point, the refusal ending is like a big middle finger straight from BioWare to everybody who has complained about the endings thus far. Think about it. The Star Child is BioWare and we're Shepard. Ooh, roleplay. Anyway. Oh, you don't like our endings? Tough shit, you lose. Interesting, isn't it? Anywho, point being, the Star Child has a Reaper voice, plain and simple. I believe it is an indication of the Star Child being a Reaper in reality, and therefore an indication that he cannot be trusted. I'm going to give this one a confirmed, but only because of this next piece of evidence, which proves the exact same point with even stronger evidence. So if you're still not convinced that the Star Child is a Reaper, try this one on for size. The Star Child never claims to be an AI. This is something that a lot of critics have been misinformed about, or perhaps they just misunderstood the conversation during the Extended Cut DLC. But the bottom line is that nowhere in the Extended Cut DLC does it say that the Star Child is an AI. This is why everybody is getting confused. While Shepard and the Star Child are talking, Shepard is the one to suggest the idea and asks the Star Child directly if he is an AI. The Star Child responds with, "Inasmuch as you are just an animal."
So you're just an AI?
Inasmuch as you are just an animal, I embody the collective intelligence of all Reapers.
This is where everybody who believes the Star Child is an AI needs to pay attention. That sentence does not mean yes. In fact, it's the exact opposite of saying yes. If anything, the Star Child is mocking Shepard for comparing him to an AI. Think about it. Inasmuch as you are just an animal, humans are far more advanced than your average animal, to the point that most people don't consider the human race to be animals, despite the fact that at our core we are. The Star Child knows this, and obviously he understands the massive gap between your traditional organic animal and a complex and advanced human being. So when the Star Child says, "Inasmuch as you are just an animal," he's actually saying that he's way more advanced than an AI, just like how we as humans are way more advanced than an animal. However, the Star Child is also acknowledging the fact that at our core we are just organics, just like how at his core he is synthetic. That's what this quote means. It doesn't mean, yes, I'm an AI. It means I'm far more advanced than what you understand an AI to be, just like how you're far more advanced than an animal. However, at my core, I am still synthetic, just like how at your core, you are still organic. Understand now? Good, because that is the accurate interpretation of the quote. So, what's way more advanced than your average AI? I don't know, how about a Reaper? They are the only thing that we currently know of to be as advanced as the Star Child is trying to make a reference to after all. Or how about this one? The Star Child is almost exactly like EDI. Aside from the Reapers themselves, EDI is far more advanced than anything else we've ever seen in the Mass Effect universe in terms of a synthetic. Her intelligence trumps the Geth by a mile. Much like how EDI controls a physical body and controls the Normandy at the same time, the Star Child also controls the Reapers. EDI is capable of rational thought and choices, and so is the Star Child. So, in a way, he's admitting that he is more than just programmed to do what he's told, like Shepard states in reference to all machines during their conversation. Now, when you combine all of this aforementioned knowledge, including the knowledge from the last 2 points prior to this one, with all of the "we" lines that the Star Child has been rattling off this entire time, like "we harvest your bodies," like the Star Child is talking as though he is one of the Reapers, then it becomes rather evident that he is in fact more than an AI, and that he is connected quite deeply with the Reapers. Look at the line, "they give me purpose," and you'll quickly see that the Star Child has an insurmountable amount of bias toward the Reapers. Originally, the whole Star Child is just an AI counter-argument came about in response to those "we" statements I just spoke of that I brought to light since the last documentary. But now that we know the Star Child is way more advanced than an AI thanks to his own statements, I think it's safe to call this one a confirmed. Phew! Glad that roll is over. However, you really need to keep all of those points in mind because they come into play again at the very end of the decision chamber room part of this documentary. But moving on for right now, there's a fundamental flaw in the ending caused by a possibility that can happen in the storyline. If the Star Child is a Reaper, or is connected to the Reapers, or is the embodiment of all Reaper knowledge, however you want to word it, then it's obvious that he also contains all the knowledge of the Reapers currently. Therefore, why didn't the Star Child know that Shepard just achieved what the Star Child said was unachievable? Geth and Quarian peace. Like I said, in some playthroughs for the most devout players of the series, it is possible to get the Geth and the Quarians to work together, rather than having to kill one of them off. However, having this possibility exist at all in the storyline blows a huge hole in the Star Child's arguments. The Star Child states that the entire reasoning for the Reapers doing what they have been doing is in order to prevent synthetic uprisings against organics. Backward logic to begin with, I know, but putting that aside for a moment, why doesn't he know that Shepard has already proven him wrong? He must know. The Reapers obviously saw the Geth working in conjunction with the Quarians and all the other organic races in an effort to stop the Reapers once and for all during this final push. So wouldn't that have stopped the Star Child and his arguments dead in their tracks? He should have been like, "We harvest you to protect you from synthetic wars." Wait a minute, never mind, my bad, we'll leave you now since you proved us wrong. Look, even if for whatever reason you're still being close-minded and don't want to believe that the Star Child is more than an AI, despite the fact that I proved you wrong already, you cannot prove this part wrong, because even an AI would have to see this change and realize that their program is no longer needed. Way back in the day, a Reaper once said, "We bring order to the chaos." That chaos is later to be revealed as the conflict between organics and synthetics. Well, guess what? Shepard already brought order to the chaos by himself without using any violence, so the Reapers are now out of a job. Time to dip out, guys, but they don't, which is one hell of a plot hole if I've ever seen one. I mean, Shepard should have just interrupted the Star Child when he was explaining that during the ending and just said, "I'm sorry, but I gotta stop you here. We already got synthetic and organic peace, so we don't need you anymore. Stop killing us now. Okay, thanks, bye." But we never get the opportunity to say that. Why not? That was a huge part of the story, and now all of a sudden it means absolutely nothing, as though it never happened? Let's rewind a bit, because I have an answer for you that can explain all of this, and it's called the Indoctrination theory. The Reapers have already stated that we'll never understand their reasons for this violence, and they're right, we never will. However, because everything that takes place during this ending, according to the theory, is just Harbinger attempting to indoctrinate Shepard, then that means Harbinger is just lying out of his ass right now through the Star Child. It doesn't make sense for a reason, because it's just all in an effort to get Shepard to join the dark side, remember? This one also gets it confirmed, because the logic behind the Star Child's core argument is flawed due to this fact, and therefore it proves that the Star Child has a Reaper agenda that he is conforming to, because he is a Reaper. Do you understand it yet? Now, toning it down a notch to something simpler to understand, let's talk about the Star Child's take on synthesis. He clearly states that synthesis is not something that can be forced. He said that the organics were not ready the first time and all the other times that they attempted synthesis. Now, this is hinting that the first time was actually with the Reapers during the first cycle against their own creators, and the result was unsuccessful, leaving the Reapers imperfect, broken, and fundamentally flawed from the fusion, which is why their logic makes no sense to us. The Star Child says Shepard is ready now. What about all the other organics involved in the process? They're sure as hell not ready. Do you think the Krogan are ready to join with the Reapers? Think again. The result would simply be another flawed attempt, plain and simple. Plus, how is Shepard ready for something he's never even heard of or considered? The Star Child is just telling him he's ready in order to try and get him to do it. And in doing so, Shepard would be succumbing to the Reaper's wishes, and will ultimately succumb to indoctrination. It's pretty simple actually, considering the fact that the Star Child is the very one giving us this information to draw from. Think about it. You can't indoctrinate somebody by force, you have to get them to accept it, which means that they have to actually lay out all of the facts in front of you. But what they do is shroud the real points in mystery and get you to question your own motives. That's how indoctrination works. Confirmed. I love it when they're short, sweet, and simple, don't you? Now it's time to come back to the coup de grace of the decision chamber room evidence. Keep in mind all the other things I told you to remember for this part. Now, we've already proven that the Star Child is a Reaper, or at the very least coincides with the Reaper agenda. We know that now. But guess what else? It's also very obvious that the Star Child has access to, and is using Shepard's mind to manipulate his perceptions of the physical world around him. How do we know this to be a 100% fact? Well, I'll answer that question with another question and see if you can figure it out before I say it myself. Why do we call the Star Child Star Child? Come on, you can do this one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1... That's right! It's because the Star Child looks and sounds like the child that we saw at the beginning of the game. Good job if you figured it out. Give yourself a pat on the back and come to our forum so we can give you a cookie emoticon. But seriously, the fact that the Star Child looks and sounds like this kid proves that the Star Child has access to Shepard's mind. This isn't speculation or an assumption, it's a fact. The Star Child looks and sounds the way he does because the Star Child is actually grabbing that image from Shepard's mind in order to present himself in that manner. How else would the Star Child have obtained the look and voice that he currently has? It's not like he was a human who spoke English way back in the day when the Reapers were first created, because there were no humans who spoke English then. Like I said, the Star Child is actually inside Shepard's mind, grabbing the images of the child from the first mission, plain and simple. So if the Star Child is 100% definitely inside Shepard's mind, then what's stopping him from putting other things in there as well? Actually no, wait, how did the Star Child even get inside Shepard's mind to begin with? Remember how I proved before that the Star Child is not an AI? Well, this is even more evidence toward that because an AI is not capable of mind reading the last time I checked. It's just not possible, unless the Star Child were to become physically connected to Shepard somehow in order to get those readings. But he never touches him, never links up with him, never does anything like that so they can transmit data back and forth. Wait a minute, yes they did. When Shepard got hit with Harbinger's laser, that's why the Star Child looks the way he does and sounds the way he does, because Harbinger tapped into Shepard's mind after hitting him with the beam. He's grabbing the image of the child and his voice out of Shepard's mind in order to construct the way the Star Child looks, and above all else, Harbinger is creating everything Shepard is seeing right now. It's just so easy to understand this time, which is awesome because it's such an irrefutable piece of evidence. I've said it before about another piece of evidence, and I'll say it again here. I dare you to come up with an explanation for it other than the one I've produced. It cannot be done. I've already tried. And do you know what's interesting? The last time I challenged the critics in the audience to come up with an explanation other than my own, none were able to construct an adequate answer. The same thing will happen again here, because what I've deduced here is the truth. Harbinger is inside Shepard's mind due to his connection with him from the laser, as evidenced by the Star Child looking like the child Shepard saw in the first mission, and therefore we can say without any reasonable doubt that Harbinger is the one producing this entire ending within Shepard's mind. It's a bold statement backed by one of the most basic and obvious elements to this ending, the physical appearance of the Star Child. It's an impenetrable argument, and therefore it gets the highest level of confirmed possible. Now, moving on to post-decision chamber room evidence, meaning evidence that happens after you make your choice. But going back to Coates for a second before anything else, why is he present in all of the picture montages at the end? Isn't he supposed to be dead on the Citadel? Well, which is it? Make up your minds, BioWare. This guy must be a wizard or something because he always seems to be in two places at once. Maybe he learned the mirror image technique from Goku or something. I don't know, but I do know this. Coates is a prominent part in each and every single ending montage. But why? We barely just met the guy. We don't want him invited into our most sensitive part of the game. Come on, this is us time. There's no room for newbies here. But seriously, it doesn't make any sense to have Coates in the montage at all if he was shown dead on the Citadel no more than a few minutes ago. Perhaps they are trying to set up Coates as the main protagonist that takes the place for Shepard for the revamped ending, which would honestly still be better than the ending we got. I can get behind a guy like Coates. Wait, I didn't mean it like that. But no, seriously again, it's just strange that he constantly is being shoved in our faces throughout the London level, and then during the ending itself. And now, even in the extended cut picture montages on top of it all. Which, by the way, can I just say something for a minute? A picture montage? That's the ending you give your 5-year-long fans, BioWare. A picture montage. Well, f*** you too then. We the fans just gave you anywhere between $180 and $300 of our hard-earned money over the last 5 years on your series, not including the newcomers to the series in this last installment, and you thank us with a crappy second-rate middle school grade slideshow ending that is supposed to make up for the already horrible ending you gave us to begin with? In the words of South Park, that's weak. Furthermore, the picture montage doesn't even tell us anything new. All it does is tell us all the things we already knew over the course of Mass Effect 3 that we did, in the form of a picture for each accomplishment, and still ignores all the major plot holes while somehow managing to create even more. And there are some people out there who actually like this new ending? Seriously? Are you kidding me? Were you thrown down a flight of stairs as a child and then picked back up, walked back up to the top of the stairs, and thrown down again? Because that's basically what would have had to have happened to you in order for you to enjoy this new ending. Anywho, your guess is as good as mine as to what they plan to do with Coates, and what his constantly nagging presence means. If I had to take a shot in the dark at explaining it, I'd say it's because according to the imagination Shepard just went through, Coates is the only one who is currently still alive, and he was helping to man the mission. It's possible that Shepard just believes he's capable of getting things done, and therefore puts him into this picture montage in his mind at the end. This one gets a plausible. But I'm still pissed about the picture montage. This next piece of evidence sets the stage for another series of pieces of evidence that also supports it, much like we did in the decision chamber room. I'm talking, of course, about how Shepard never dies in the destroy ending, despite all of the things that had to be endured. Like I said, I went over a nice long list of everything that should have killed Shepard in the documentaries previously, and I stand by those statements 100%, because there's absolutely no reason whatsoever for Shepard to survive. Go review that section of the first documentary again if your mind is a little foggy on the subject. So, remember back in the last documentary where I addressed the whole Shepard breathing in space thing? Okay, well, BioWare answered that by saying that there was a magical force field around the Citadel creating an atmosphere for Shepard to breathe in. Remember that? Okay, well, thanks to another loyal follower to CleverNoob named Such Simplicity, he tipped us off about a very important fact. Back in Mass Effect 1, this already happened. Shepard and company needed to make it to the top of the Citadel Tower to stop Sovereign. They were taking an elevator when it suddenly stopped. The crew put on their helmets and Shepard shot open the glass as the crew stepped outside to scale the side of the Citadel Tower now on foot, now that they had been exposed to the new possibilities thanks to the physics of being in space. There was no air for them to breathe, there was no atmosphere. Shepard and his crew needed their helmets to survive, and that was all when the Citadel arms were closed. In Mass Effect 3, Shepard is quite literally in the same situation, being exposed to space with no atmosphere whatsoever, and this time the Citadel wings are actually open, meaning any magical force field couldn't exist in the first place any longer even if it had been there. So, it's your move, BioWare. Why is Shepard able to breathe in space? Your original answer doesn't cut it anymore. But since they'll probably never answer me, I'll do it for them. It's because that scene took place in Shepard's mind, and therefore, he had no requirement for air or an atmosphere. Ta-da! Another plot hole filled by the indoctrination theory. See how easy this is, BioWare? Confirmed again. Guess what else? Without even realizing it, Mike Gamble actually confirmed a huge piece of the indoctrination theory during Comic-Con 2012. How, you ask? Because a guest at Comic-Con asked the panel a question about the Shepard breathing scene. Mike Gamble's response included the confirmation that Shepard has rebar all around him. Remember this age-old argument from the very first documentary about whether or not it was rebar or wires that was protruding out of the ground all around Shepard? Well, guess what? Gamble himself said the word rebar in reference to the breathing scene. It wasn't a slip-up or anything even remotely close to that.
My question is, what's the motivation with the teaser survival of Shepard and the particular ending?
A giant piece of rebar could just eventually fall on him. Yeah. I don't know.
Admitting the fact that it is rebar proves the case because there's rebar everywhere in London, and after Shepard gets hit by Harbinger's laser, there's no doubt that there would be rebar sticking out of the ground from the now overturned concrete ground. Furthermore, the ending montage itself actually confirmed the fact that there is zero chance Shepard is laying on the Citadel. Why? Because there's not even a Citadel core left. As you can see, the entire core of the Citadel has been blown to smithereens, and Shepard was at the source of that blast. Look at this picture and try to tell me he's still alive. Do it! You'd be lying. Another confirmed. Jumping off of those 2 points, this next and final piece of evidence is essentially the strongest piece of evidence in support of the indoctrination theory, which is why I've saved it for last. It simply trumps all the rest. Harbinger's laser. Let's face it, there's absolutely no way Shepard can survive being hit directly with Harbinger's laser. It's simply impossible. It's not just impossible because I'm telling you it's impossible, but it's impossible because, guess what? It's impossible. Use that big, beautiful brain of yours. I know you can come to the same conclusion if you just plug it back in really quick and use it for just one teeny tiny second. It won't hurt, I promise. Why is it impossible? Because a Reaper's laser cleaves through everything it touches without so much as a hitch, and when it comes into contact with an organic, they vaporize. For example, remember at the beginning of Mass Effect 3 in the Vancouver mission? Remember when that Reaper cuts that Alliance Dreadnought ship in half with a single blow? I showed it to you earlier in the documentary as well. Yeah, well, guess what? In real life, modern-day spacecrafts are made from a wide range of materials, including titanium and carbon. Titanium melts at 3,034 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon melts at 6,381 degrees Fahrenheit. And guess what else? In the Mass Effect universe, I'm willing to bet that the spacecrafts are made from materials that are at least twice as resilient as those are, if not the same. Now, guess what temperature a human begins to melt, disintegrate, / vaporize at, however you want to call it. If you guessed around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, you win! So, what does this mean? Well, it's exactly like I said. It is scientifically impossible for Shepard to have survived Harbinger's blast, plain and simple. Shepard should have been vaporized like an ice cube thrown into the sun upon impact. If you don't believe me because you don't think the same laws apply in the world of Mass Effect, then just look at Mass Effect for all the evidence you need. Like I said in the beginning of Mass Effect, an entire Dreadnought ship is annihilated by a single strike. All it ever takes for a Reaper to take out anything is a single strike. Why? Because it cleaves through everything like a hot knife through butter. It simply cannot be stopped. What's more, there have been multiple occasions in Mass Effect 3 where people have been shown getting hit by a Reaper laser. The outcome is exactly as I have said. They get vaporized. In fact, the most notable example of this is quite literally just a few minutes before the ending Charge Down the Hill scene, where the team fighting the Reaper that Shepard shoots missiles at gets completely annihilated and vaporized in a single blow. They likely had on the same exact quality of armor that Shepard is wearing. Still not convinced? Just look at the Charge Down the Hill scene itself. I literally stood there for about 5 minutes and I just sat and watched all the troops run right into Harbinger's laser and go poof! They just vanished out of thin air and disintegrated, like I said. This happens to every single one of the fully shielded troops. Still not convinced? Well then take off your damn blinders this time and pay attention. In the low EMS version of the ending where Shepard's squad mates die, guess what happens to them when they are hit with the laser? They vaporize. Poof, gone, just like that. No trace left behind. Now there are only two things in this world that can make a person vaporize when hit directly. 1. A Reaper laser, and 2. Being hit by a Rainbow Dash's Sonic Rain Boom. Don't ask me how I know that. Anywho, the squad mates likely have on the same high level of quality armor that Shepard would have on, since, you know, they were on the same team with the same amount of funds and everything, and you yourself outfitted them with the best armor possible at that time, just like you did for Shepard. But the bottom line is this: Shepard should be dead. Indoctrination theory or not, Shepard should be dead. He got hit with a Reaper laser, and he is now vaporized like the rest. Or at least, he should be, so why isn't he? It's not because Shepard is one resilient bastard, as the critics would have you believe, because it's not a matter of resilience. Shepard is a human being, an organic, flesh and blood, just like the rest of them. Granted, he has a few internal upgrades, but nothing that would stop him from being disintegrated upon impact. So why is Shepard still alive? Well, I can answer that either in one of two ways. The first one isn't an answer that you'll likely be pleased with, but it's also a strong possibility, that Shepard is already dead. You know how they say the whole life flashes before your eyes thing? Yeah, well, that very well could be what's happening to Shepard right now. He got hit by Harbinger's laser, and now that white transition light and the ringing sound we heard right before he gets hit, along with the slowed down time, sets the stage for Shepard's mind to take off on its own and determine how he would have preferred the story to end. It makes perfect sense considering the fact that, you know, it's impossible for Shepard to survive a full-blown Reaper laser. Basically, if this ends up being true, it will be for the same reasons as the indoctrination theory. In fact, it would be basically the exact same thing as the indoctrination theory, minus the indoctrination part. BioWare could just retcon the entire ending, kill off Shepard, and then have his love interest or another squad mate finish the fight. It's not ideal to end it without Shepard, but honestly, I think it would make for one hell of a dramatic ending, and a good one at that. At the very least, it would be 10 times better than this pile of garbage that we received. Didn't like that one? That's fine. The only other possibility for Shepard to have survived the blast is if Harbinger actually toned down on the blast specifically so as to not kill Shepard, but to rather indoctrinate him. Remember that whole thing I was talking about at the beginning of this documentary, where I basically proved without a reasonable doubt that Harbinger was deliberately trying not to hit Shepard, was avoiding him, and was waiting until he got a clear shot at him? Well, guess what? This fits in perfectly with that again, because if Shepard really survived this all in the Destroy ending, then it's either because of the reason I just stated just a minute ago, or it's because Harbinger just didn't want to kill Shepard, but rather critically injure him enough to stop him, and then immediately afterward begin the final indoctrination attempt. It makes perfect sense from Harbinger's standpoint. He has wanted nothing more than to indoctrinate Shepard ever since Mass Effect 2. Harbinger has even openly stated it on multiple occasions. That's nothing new. But at the same time, he can't have Shepard in his way ruining the Reaper's plans. So what does he do when he finally gets his chance and meets Shepard face to face for the first time? He kills everybody around Shepard first, and then when Shepard gets close enough, Harbinger dials back on the power he was using on his laser and only puts Shepard into critical condition, which would weaken his mental state as well, and then try to convert him. It's actually a brilliant plan, to be honest, one that an enemy such as Harbinger is known for. In Mass Effect 2, Indoctrination was the name of the game for Harbinger, so was directly controlling people by force. How is this any different now? It's perfectly reasonable to assume that a Reaper is in full control of how strong their blasts are, and it's perfectly reasonable to assume that Harbinger needs to physically stop Shepard before putting the final squeeze on his mind. With all this in mind, I truly don't understand how this theory can be a theory anymore. It has just developed too many strong points, and has even been proven to be scientifically accurate. In the science world, they call that a law, not a theory. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, this is more than confirmed. It's so confirmed that there isn't even a word for it. Seriously, and I'll leave this final piece of evidence with this bold closing statement. Anybody who denies this piece of evidence is just being ignorant and is just upset about being wrong. If the ending to Mass Effect 3 is a puzzle, then the indoctrination theory is all of the pieces, because it fits in perfectly with the ending. Now, I want to let you in on a little secret. I've never told you in these documentaries whether or not I support the theory. Do you know why? Because I'm one of those critics that I always bash. I have been seriously flamed by a lot of other critics because they believe that I'm a die-hard fanboy of the indoctrination theory. But in reality, the only reason that it seems like I'm a huge supporter of the theory is because I've spent the last 3 months researching every piece of evidence, debating the meaning of each and every single tidbit of evidence, trying to disprove every single thing, and above all else, have been trying to find something that can adequately fill in all the plot holes and create one hell of an awesome ending that the series deserves, all at the same time. And it's called the indoctrination theory. So here's my point. If you still see critics after this documentary bashing the indoctrination theory, then it just means that they haven't watched the documentaries yet and or don't understand the theory yet, because I've already considered all the arguments any critic can make when I create these documentaries, because I'm a critic, like I said. Do I want it to be true in the end? Of course, because if so, then it means we the fans will get a well-deserved, well-thought-out ending to an amazing series. But if not, then the Mass Effect series will always be remembered as the series that fell flat on its face during the last meter of the 200-meter dash. No DLC can ever change that fact, unless it's an indoctrination-themed DLC that provides us with a brand new ending, because this current ending still does not do justice to the series, and the indoctrination theory can wipe that all away and pave the way for an amazing ending to what was once an amazing series. What I've been doing over the course of these 3 documentaries is simply laying out the facts, analyzing them, and trying to see what has been the truth, or rather what would be the closest to being true. And in most cases, the indoctrination theory has actually come out as the winner. So, in an essence, yes, I am an indoctrination theory supporter, but at the same time, I'm one of the toughest critics that it's ever seen. By the way, I'd like to reiterate the fact that the indoctrination theory is anything but dead. It's empowered now more than it ever has been before. The only reason people say that BioWare killed the indoctrination theory is because they expected BioWare to give us an answer with the extended cut DLC, when BioWare never once said that they were going to do that. If anything, BioWare has actually been adamantly defending the indoctrination theory ever since the extended cut DLC. At one point, face value fans were trashing indoctrination theorists in the official indoctrination theory topic on the BioWare forums, saying that the topic should be moved to the fan fiction section. Chris Priestley actually came into the conversation and told them that the topic is staying in the Mass Effect 3 storyline discussion forum because the indoctrination theory is still a valid possibility as an ending. This is not the only time since the Extended Cut DLC has been released that the BioWare staff have defended the indoctrination theory either, as they've actually repeated multiple times that the indoctrination theory still remains as a valid interpretation of the ending. The problem is that they haven't capitalized on it yet. But before I go, I'd like to discuss with you the future of the series, if there is one at all, that is. First and foremost, let's talk Leviathan DLC. By the time most of you watch this, the Leviathan DLC will have already come out, or will be coming out within the next few days after this video has been uploaded. I'm calling it right now. Leviathan DLC will be a flashy and probably interesting aspect of gameplay added to Mass Effect 3, and it's going to throw more minor bait your way to keep you conspiring, because when we conspire, BioWare and EA makes money. The Leviathan DLC is not going to confirm the indoctrination theory, and it is not going to deny it. I'm telling you right now. At least, that's what I'm predicting. Instead, we are going to get a few lines of dialogue added to the ending with the Starchild that relate back to the Leviathan DLC, and possibly learn some kind of deep dark secret about the Reapers and Leviathan that everybody's going to ask my opinion on, and this will be my answer. Until BioWare gives us the clear-cut answer that we deserve, followed by an ending that the series deserves, I will not be giving them another second of my attention. BioWare has more or less permanently lost one of their most devout fans, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But the only way to get it across to them is to stop buying their DLC and to stop supporting them. Not until they do right by you and justify the money that you've spent on this series. We deserve to be treated like the fan base that has supported this company. No, built this company, when it was just started by 3 med school graduates and 100 grand trying to start a gaming company. We the fans are the reason that BioWare and the Mass Effect series has become what it is today, and we deserve to be rewarded for our devotion. Actually, it's not even a reward, it's more like giving us what we deserve, an ending to the series. The Extended Cut DLC was nothing but another slap in the face to all the fans as a whole, and the sad part is, there are people out there who actually enjoyed being slapped in the face just because the ending isn't as bad as it was. But the bottom line is that it still pales in comparison to how the Mass Effect series deserves to end. Like I said, the Leviathan DLC will likely be a fun and interesting DLC, but it means absolutely nothing unless we get a revamped ending. It doesn't have to be the indoctrination theory either, that's actually not what these closing statements are about. Despite the fact that the indoctrination theory is the best way to fix this ending, it doesn't matter to any of us whether or not it's used. We just want a good ending. We are also simply sick and tired of being toyed with, and I for one will not be playing into their hand any longer. In fact, these documentaries have probably given BioWare far more attention than they deserve, when in fact these documentaries were trying to prove a point. BioWare isn't going to listen to you unless you talk with your money. And remember, this is EA's fault probably even more than BioWare's, but you can't really get back at EA unless you withhold your money, and in order to do that you have to go through BioWare. I still like BioWare as a company. I hate EA, but I still like BioWare. But until they make right what they have wronged, I will be doing everything in my power to ensure that nobody purchases a single DLC or another game that they produce. It sounds harsh and probably very dramatic, but they wasted 5 years of our lives and essentially made us waste anywhere between $180 and $300 on a series that ended about as anticlimactically as the Modern Warfare series did. BioWare is better than that, and until they prove it, I am done with them. And I sincerely hope that you join me with this, because until you show BioWare and EA that you aren't supporting them any longer until they fix this ending, then this storyline that we have all grown to love will continue to be defiled. It's time to revive the Retake Mass Effect movement once again, and this time it needs to be shown with our wallets and our limited attention to BioWare and EA. Look, like I said, I still respect BioWare as a company and all of their employees. And I'm not saying that they should all be fired or anything. But I am saying that we as their fans need to put our foot down, because apparently they didn't get the memo last time. This is a call to you, yes you, watching this video right now. Stop buying BioWare's DLC and EA's games, stop posting on the BioWare social network forums, stop following them on Twitter, and stop supporting them. We need everybody to get back in this and first keep telling BioWare how disappointed you are as a fan of the series, and then as soon as you're done, completely cut off all ties with BioWare and EA and move on to a better gaming company in the industry. Look, you're obviously watching this video in the first place because you have a place in your heart for the series, but unless we all do our part and force a better ending out of BioWare, we simply aren't going to get one. They're going to continuously produce more DLC and dangle the possibility of ending-related concepts in front of your face. If you bite, they're going to make money, and then they're just going to do it again and again and again. And then maybe when they're finally finished within a half a year to a year from now, and everybody has moved on, perhaps then they will come out with a half-assed Indoctrination Theory DLC in order to prey on your past hopes for one final bout of money-making. All you have to do to prevent this, and to get an ending for the series that it deserves, is to do everything that I said. First, tell them how pissed off you are still. Jump back into the retake Mass Effect movement. Keep tweeting those hashtags of disapproval, keep posting on forums everywhere you post about your disapproval, and don't you dare give BioWare and EA another penny of your money. It is the only way that a company listens. We've already done the work for them in creating this amazing ending fix that they just need to capitalize on and add to. It wouldn't take much to impress us after this abomination of an ending, let's face it. Watch BioWare, I'll do it for you. After beating Indoctrination, Shepard severely cripples Harbinger because it was the strongest indoctrination attempt that Harbinger has ever done, letting the rest of the squad mates rush down the hill alongside Anderson and Coates. They all go up to the beam and activate the Crucible, which activates an ancient VI that was hiding in the Citadel all this time, which is based around the race that created the Reapers. You learn the ways and how the Reapers took over their creators, and that the Crucible was in fact created by the creators of the Reapers, and that it's actually an emergency shutdown signal for all of the Reapers that they were not able to complete before the Reapers rebelled. The squad activates it, perhaps after a boss fight with an indoctrinated Elusive Man, this time with Anderson being the squad leader, and perhaps Anderson or Coates makes an epic sacrifice to finish the Elusive Man off, while the rest of the squad finally activates the Crucible. Maybe Shepard dies from his injuries due to a low EMS rating, or maybe he survives due to a high EMS rating, and perhaps we could even throw a dark matter plot twist in that Mass Effect 3 was supposed to originally end with, just to give the players one more choice to contemplate at the end. Or BioWare, if you want to do a complete retcon of the ending, all you have to do is say everybody hit their head when they fell into the ditch in the Mako tank, and then that's when the whole dream started. Look, I just made a better ending in a matter of seconds. That's how easy it is to fix this ending. Adopt the Indoctrination Theory so that you have a place to restart the ending from, and then make a better ending. As many of you already know, the Indoctrination Theory also sets the perfect stage for Mass Effect 4. If there's one thing I know, it's that EA loves money. EA's mission statement openly admits that their only goal is to produce hit after hit on a regular basis. Madden and FIFA, anyone? Point being that a money train such as the Mass Effect series is almost too good to pass up. And while I don't believe just yet that we'll ever see a Mass Effect 4, I do believe a Mass Effect 4 title would be an ideal fix to this ending problem. Way more than any DLC could ever do. And I also believe that from a purely business standpoint, it makes perfect sense to continue the series. Fans are upset, fans are still upset even after this extended cut DLC, and people want to see more. A fourth installment of the series would allow BioWare to fix the ending, give them all the time they need to set up an amazing new ending, and make both BioWare and EA even richer in the process, not to mention infamous in the gaming industry. It's a win-win. The fans would be ecstatic, and both companies would be happy. All they need to do in order to make it happen is adopt the Indoctrination Theory in whichever way they choose. This way, they can pick up where Shepard is left laying in the Destroy ending, having just beat Indoctrination and near death from the reduced beam strike. the world would be BioWare's oyster, having pretty much unlimited possibilities and a fresh slate with which to continue the story. Perhaps beating Indoctrination could even weaken Harbinger, like I said, which weakens the Reapers as a whole, and they temporarily leave to restore their strength. It's really not hard to do this, BioWare. I just did all of this on the top of my head. Imagine how amazing Mass Effect 4 could be if BioWare brings Drew Karpyshyn, the original lead writer of the Mass Effect series who left Mass Effect 3 for another BioWare project, back into the mix in addition to all of the already veteran writers. Think you can do better at making your own ending? Then come to the CleverNoob forums at clevernoob.com/forums and join our contest where you can win a signed copy from me if you choose of the Mass Effect 3 Collector's Edition game and Collector's Edition guidebook, or a custom designed hat based around the Indoctrination theories made by one of our own forum goers named Flounder, or a sealed and appraised copy of Mass Effect 2. The point behind this contest is to get you to realize just how easy it is to make a better ending than the one that we got. If you can write an awesome ending, then there really is no reason that BioWare can't do it, and you could win that free stuff in the process. And before I go, I'd like to leave you with one final rumor to speculate over. There is a brand spanking new rumor going around about something called Project X. I actually cannot tell you who I got this information from, but you've been following me for the last few months now, so trust me on this when I say that I trust the source that this information originates from, as it's actually somebody who has already contributed to the theory greatly in the past, who evidently has ties to somebody in the inner circle of BioWare. Basically, Project X is rumored to be a massive DLC that BioWare has been keeping their lips absolutely sealed about. This is the reason that I do not want to reveal who this information originates from, because it could come back and bite the employee in the ass who let it out in the first place. That is, if it is even true to begin with. Now, the reason that this is significant is because this isn't supposed to be just another ordinary DLC. In fact, first of all, it is supposed to come out in Q1 of 2013. That's a rather long time to work on just another DLC, don't you think? Secondly, this DLC is supposedly going to bring about all of the other DLCs, the Extended Cut DLC, the Leviathan DLC, and the rumored Omega DLC, full circle in conjunction with the ending. It is even rumored that it's going to be a post-breath scene DLC, which is why it has also been referred to as the Indoctrination DLC. We'll find out come Q1 of next year, but it is no doubt something that fits perfectly into everything that we've been talking about throughout this entire documentary. No, all 3 documentaries, really. It fits their business plan, it fits the secrecy, it fits everything that we've been speculating like a glove. Just remember, as of this documentary, it is just a rumor. The last thing we want to do is leak the ending again and make them have to screw it up all over again. But either way, thank you so much for being a part of this journey that has spanned over the last few months. It really means a lot to me personally, and look at the amazing community we have developed as a result. I'll leave you with these parting words that I want you to remember. This is a call to arms. You're capable of changing this ending. All you have to do is keep the momentum going with the Retake Mass Effect movement. Keep pushing the Indoctrination theory as an easy fix for the bad ending. Keep telling BioWare how upset you are and no longer support them until they fix this ending. And most of all, actually do that. Do not support BioWare or EA Games until they do justice to this series. Until then, hold the line, hold your wallet, and do everything in your power to wake Shepard up once and for all. It's been a pleasure, everybody. I'll see you another time.